Hi, I'm Dr. Donna Lane.
And I'm Dr. David Lane.
We're continuing our conversation tonight about the top 10 most effective parenting qualities. And tonight, David is going to talk about modeling. So I'll let you take it away.
Well, I got to start with some bad news. We get what we model. And what that means is what our children see us doing, they're going to do as well. And so the bad news is everything that I do, I have to know that somebody's watching me, and I have to decide, is that what I want to be teaching? Everything under the sun imaginable, really bad habits, smoking, etc. Is that what I want my children to learn? Because that's what I'm going to get. James Dobson rather famously said, values are caught, not taught. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about modeling. And the idea is to model what it is that you want to see. So I have to evaluate everything that I do, literally. If I want to lay in bed all day, I'm really tired, and I want to lay in bed all day, what am I potentially teaching my children? If I think that it's okay to go out with the guys and come home and I've had too much to drink, my kids see me, what am I teaching my children? If, on the other hand, I have integrity and I work and I live with character and I have high values and I have standards that are solid and firm ground that I stand on, what am I teaching my children? And I have to be aware of everything that I do and walk the walk, so to speak, and not just say a bunch of words, because they're going to see what I'm doing. They're going to trust the behavior, and they're going to do those things instead of what it is that I say I'm doing. There's a value. Our families have values, and we teach those values through our behavior. If, for instance, one of the values in our family is education. We always placed a high value on education. And so our children, by seeing us work hard, get good educations, they were then inspired and felt somewhat compelled to complete their educations. And they did. All of them did, and very successful academically, now very successful professionally. And so we decided a long time ago what we wanted to model for our kids. And then we started practicing those behaviors and doing those behaviors in front of our children so the children would know what it was that they needed to be doing and catch the values from us. Communication is another example. If I expect my children to be honest and straightforward with me, then guess how I have to be? I have to be honest and straightforward with them. If I want my children to speak their mind and say what's on their mind in a respectful way, then I have to speak my mind and say what's on my mind in a respectful way. If I'm a yeller and a screamer, then I'm teaching my children to yell and scream. But if I am moderate and I set an example and role model, talking when I'm bothered about something, talking when I'm happy about something, talking over issues that we have, negotiating a middle ground, then that's what I will most likely get from my children. And so it flows out in all of those directions, everything from just overt behavior to subtle things like communication, problem solving, the ability to negotiate, the ability to imagine different solutions to different scenarios, the ability to see potential consequences out of whatever behavior I'm having. All of those things have got to be assessed individually by the parents, and then a plan developed of this is what I want to teach my children, and then I modify my behavior to match what it is that I want to teach my children. And that's where it gets really hard, and that's the bad news, is in order to teach my children the things that I want to teach them, I've got to make sure that I'm teaching my children those things that I want to teach them. I've got to be showing them those things. I've got to explain it with words, then I've got to show it with behavior. And it can't be overstated how important it is to take that good, hard look in the mirror, realize that everything you say and do is teaching something, and to figure out by looking in the mirror, is that what I intend to teach? Is that what I want to teach? And if not, I need to do something about it. And I'm back to the bad news and the hard part again.
So looking in the mirror is actually the first step in parenting. Checking yourself, looking and seeing, where are my weaknesses? Where are my places where I can improve and where I need growth myself? And then intentionally work on those things so that as your kids witness you working on them, then they understand what you're working toward. So I want to emphasize in everything that David's saying that there is no way for anyone to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect. We're not perfect. There's not a perfect person on the world. So he's not setting an expectation that somehow you have to be perfect at all times and never get upset or never make a mistake. Of course, you're going to make mistakes. But if you take that look in the mirror, like he talked about, and you do the work on you, even when you're not perfect at it, the children see you're working on it. And you can even talk to them about, this is something I'm working on. And what that teaches them is that it's okay to make mistakes, number one, and which is a good thing to learn. Perfectionism is not healthy, nor is it possible. And the second thing they learn is, I'm going to model working on myself. I'm going to follow that example of when I've got a problem, I know I can work towards solving it. And so they learn that self-reflection, that insight development that needs to be taught. It's not necessarily natural. And all that by you just owning that you're working on something and sharing with them and admitting, this is something that I have struggled with, but I'm working on it. And these are the things I'm doing to work on it. And and then they see you doing that and they believe you, and then they trust that you're doing the best you can. So love covers over a multitude of sins, and children are very forgiving. And so when you are doing your best and making your best effort, as long as you are reflecting and introspective about what you're doing, and it's about bringing it into awareness. It's about being aware that everything I say and everything I do is teaching something, and then being intentional about what you choose to teach.
We talked about, before we ever started having children, that here are the things that we want our children to know. We want them to behave in a safe manner. We want them to be safe. We want them to be responsible for themselves and for their things, their property. And we want them to be respectful of themselves and other people. So then every intervention that we did with our kids, we would say, we are trying to help you learn how to be responsible. And then we would behave in a way that modeled responsibility, and then hold the kids accountable for being responsible for themselves and for their behavior, being respectful, et cetera, et cetera. And we decided on that before we ever got married. Really, we were talking about it. Donna mentioned in one of the previous talks that we did that before we even got married, after we knew we were going to get married, we started talking about, okay, family, what's it going to be like? What's it going to look like? Are we going to have children? Yes, probably. We like kids and we want to have a family. Okay, what do we want to teach them? What are those lessons that we want to teach them? And we all have these little quirks or foibles or things that we all have to work on. At times, everybody could fly off the handle or do something like speak sharply, and you regret it just a moment later. Then what do? Well, this is a teachable moment. I said something that I regret having said. I can go to my child then and say, I'm really sorry. I spoke sharply. It was unkind. It was disrespectful of you. And I want you to know how sorry I am. And I apologize for that. And what did I just teach them or start teaching them? A way to be respectful is when I've hurt another person, I go and make amends. I make an apology and I make amends for that. And that's a respectful way to treat other human beings. And so we have to not be perfect, like Donna's saying. We don't, no need to even strive for it. It's impossible. What we can do is be reflective. We go look in that mirror. We do the introspection. Are these the things I want to be teaching my children? Is what I just did a model for what I want my children to know, the guidelines that I want them to live by, the safety, respect, and responsibility? Are those the things that I'm imparting here in what I do? And if upon reflection, I see that no, it's not, then I need to go and correct that. I need to do better next time. Or if I've wronged one of them, then I need to go and apologize and make amends. And then I have the expectation that they do the same thing because I did it. And I expect you to do the same thing when you hurt your brother, when you hurt your sister, when you hurt mom's feelings. Then I expect you to do the same kind of thing, because then you're being responsible for your feelings, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. You're being responsible for those things. And that's definitely a lesson I want to teach.
Mm-hmm. So conflict resolution is a really good example of something that is modeled on an ongoing basis. The husband and wife, when they have conflict, some people choose to take the conflict in the bedroom, separate from the vision of the children. I would,
out of sight of the children.
Yeah, out of sight. I would say they probably know that a conflict's going on anyway, but I would not suggest that for every conflict, because they need to see you resolving conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, if it's a huge, big thing that has topics that they don't need to hear about, yes, you take it and you do it out of their eyesight. You do it separate from them. But sometimes just working through a disagreement in front of the kids is very beneficial to them if you have good conflict resolution skills, if you have worked on and practiced resolving the conflicts between the two of you to create a win-win for both people. You know, you present your point of view, the other presents their point of view, you find the compromise, you develop that win-win scenario. They learn then how to compromise with their peers, how to resolve those issues when they want to have their way, but somebody else wants to have their way. Well, what do? You taught them how to compromise, how to come up with a good solution for everybody by modeling it. Now, you can tell them all day long, you know, when you have a conflict with your peers, you need to, you know, work it out. You need to try to come to some understanding, but when they see it, they understand it. That's when it means something to them. So practice good conflict resolution with your spouse, and by the modeling that you do, teach the children how to do the same.
And it turns out that there's only 2 or 3 things that separate families that really struggle from families that operate pretty smoothly. And one of them is the ability to negotiate. But undergirding negotiation is everybody feeling like they're able to voice their opinion and they are treated with respect when they do. So I model that by disagreements that I have with Donna, and she models that by disagreements she has with me, and how we work together to solve those problems lays the groundwork for how they learn to work together to solve the problems. Donna and I see a lot of couples together, and we do some family work together. And when we're doing an assessment, we ask about what was your family like growing up? Now, husband, tell me what your family was like growing up. And a follow-up question, a number of follow-up questions, but one of the follow-up questions is always, what would a child learn growing up in the environment that you grew up in? And that's a question we all need to ask ourselves. What would a child learn growing up in the environment that I'm creating here in my home and in my marriage? And it's just an extraordinarily important question, because if they're not learning what it is that I want them to learn, then I need to go look in the mirror and figure out what I need to do to create the circumstances under which they can learn. And a large portion of that is my modeling.
You can ask yourself that same question if you find that there's something that gets stirred up in you under certain circumstances, and the kids act a certain way, and you just always, that just gets on your last nerve. Go back and ask the question, where did I learn that? What about that stirs me up? And go back to your earliest memories and see what environment was I in, and what did that environment teach me? And from that insight, you can make changes that you want to make in order to have a different environment for your children that teaches them something different from what you learned. One of the great things about being a parent is being able to change the generational dynamics. If I don't like what happened in the last generation, I change it in this generation, and I change it for the next generation. And that's a very healing thing to do, actually, to be able to make that change generationally. So that, the way that they did things, in my grandmother's generation or my father's generation, I want to do things a little bit differently, or maybe a lot differently if it wasn't a great environment. And then I can make those changes. It's very empowering. And so asking the question can give you the insight to be able to make those changes.
What did I learn in the environment that I grow up in? And what do I want my children to learn in the environment that they're growing up in? And some of those lessons are great. We learned some great lessons, even some very, very difficult circumstances and difficult family dynamics can teach some really good lessons. And so you keep those. Mm-hmm. And the really bad ones, you decide to discard, because now you're an adult and you can eat your dessert first if you want to. You get to make those decisions.
Right.
And so the moral of the story is be wary of what you're teaching with your behavior. Your words are that's second tier. The most important is the behavior that I'm exhibiting. Is that teaching what I want my children to learn?
Mm-hmm. Along the same lines, looking at your method of intervention in behavioral problems for your children. The way that you intervene in their behavioral issues always teaches them something. Do you set up power struggles? Do you make it about control? And if you do, you might get the behavior you want. They might behave for you. They might come under your control. But what you're teaching them is that there's going to be an external power that tells them what to do, instead of them internalizing the ability to set their own limits and regulate their own emotions and their own behavior. So now that's a process, and you begin by giving them very narrow boundaries and limits, but as time goes on, you spread those limits out so that they learn to internalize and make the decisions themselves to go down the path that produces the most positive results for them, not because you said so, but because they want to. And so that's an example of my intervention. Even my behavioral interventions model something for them. And do I want them to be externally driven? Do I want other forces in their life to control their choices? Then I can control their choices and do that and teach them that that's how to live life. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend allowing them choice, guiding those choices, and thereby teaching them that other things, other people don't have control over them. They are the authority in their own lives. That's going to serve them very well when they're teenagers and there's a lot of peer pressure and their peers are telling them, do this, do that you don't want them to do, and that you have in fact instilled in them not to do. If they have internalized that, then they'll make that choice on their own, and you won't have to come in with external control to make sure they do it. So that's another place where you need to be asking the question, as you intervene, what is this intervention teaching my children? Is this the lesson I want them to learn? And try to understand all of the layers of what your interventions are teaching. Do I yell at them and say, you are so bad, in such a way that they don't understand the difference between a poor choice and a bad me? And when you make it about their personhood and they are bad, then they learn they're bad. When you treat them like they are bad, then they learn that they're bad, as opposed to, I don't like that choice. That choice is a problem. That choice is going to have negative consequences for you, which teaches them I can always make a different choice. These are just some examples that we hope will help you understand how important it is that you model what you intend to teach.
And it all starts with you. You can go look in the mirror and decide, here's what I want to teach my children, and these are the behaviors that I'm going to have in order to teach those things and model what it is that you want your children to know.
All right. Glad that you joined us for this modeling moment. And we will see you next week with a continuation of the top 10 list.